Okay, welcome everybody. Of course, thank you for coming. A polite reminder to please turn off your cell phones, make all the noises mute. If we hear noises, I might make you make a donation to ALS research. I am going to do that anyway. Okay, so I'm Ryan. Neil and I were friends for 25 years. I do want to begin by saying, this sucks, right? This sucks, you know, that we have to be here, the circumstances that brought us here. And the reason I say this sucks is because it's kind of in the spirit of Neil's incredibly wicked sense of humor, which was what a lot of us really loved about him. So we are going to have some dark humor today as a toast to Neil, perhaps some non-traditional funeral type stuff. So you guys just need to be ready and relax and enjoy the ride the way that Neil would have liked. Some basic logistical stuff for today. We are going to have a life story presented by Neil's partner Andrea, and then we're going to have some stories, anecdotes, tales from family and friends, and we'll have a short time reserved for anybody that's here that wanted to say another fun anecdote that they have with Neil. There is a signing of the urn that's at the front here afterwards, followed by the obligatory mingling with food. And then I'm going to kick you all out at 3:30. That's because somebody else died and needs this space. Okay, so if you're not getting Neil's dark humor yet, you need to get there, okay? Now, even though you're going to get kicked out, we are gathering at Heroes Welcome Pub on Main Street at 23rd afterwards, so you can come and have a drink there. Keep that in mind. You may have noticed in the other room some of Neil's things. So there's an Atari t-shirt raffle. Who gives away prizes at a funeral, right? Okay, so we do acknowledge Neil's battle with ALS, and the point of the shirt is just actually to draw attention to the sign next to it, which is about a Project Hope, which is about a research program at UBC, and we're asking people to, if they can or would like to make a donation to Project Hope to end ALS. Also, you'll see there an Atari 2600, which was Neil's childhood gaming system, and a bunch of family and friends got together to buy him that, which he enjoyed. And Neil decided today that no one else is allowed to play it without him. It was working before it came here, and now it's not working. But we were hoping to have it going for you. Also, you'll see actually a comic book that Neil wrote and illustrated. And there's a bunch of copies there. Take one home with you if you like. That's there for you as well. And then we are going to hear, I believe now, from Neil's partner, Andrea.
This is kind of weird. It feels like this is like kind of a show, and like I should have been getting applause coming up, but yeah, that's not what we're doing here today. All right. So today I'm going to deliver to you the story of Neil and an exhaustive account. Our story begins in Halifax, Nova Scotia at 2:47 a.m. on December 3rd, 1974, when Laurie and Wanda Emms welcomed a second baby boy to their family. His older brother, Colin, was by all accounts quite pleased about becoming a big brother. In fact, when Neil was about 1, he came down with a bad cold and had to stay in hospital overnight for oxygen. Colin was quite concerned, asking whether they had to give him back. Laurie and Wanda reassured him that Neil was there to stay. The family moved to Calgary in the mid-70s, where Neil and Colin were baptized as Catholic, largely so they could attend St. Sylvester's School when the public school system went on strike. Neil's attraction to the furrier members of households started at a young age, whether it be Laurie's mum Edna's dog Wiggy, or the family's cats Echo and famous supermodel Christy Brinkley. This affinity for pet friends, of course, continued into adulthood, including Honey, an unnamed rescue kitten that Neil was happy to help socialize, Haley, Sky, Noche, Momo and Cooper. Neil's well-known love of all things Star Wars also started at a tender young age, when Laurie took him, Colin, and Wanda's mom Carrie's husband Jack to the first film in Calgary. Neil was clearly impacted, as evidenced by his impressive future Chewbacca collection. We have here a picture of the entire collection, and I have brought a representative cell call who we have up front here with us today. As a child, in the summer, Neil was most likely found barreling around the neighborhood on his bike. This was interrupted briefly when, at around 12 or 13, Neil had a bike accident, breaking his arm. Even after several months in a cast, Neil wasn't deterred, getting right back up on his bike, and immediately falling and breaking his arm for a second time. Laurie and Wanda required each Emms brother to choose one winter and one summer activity. For his winter activity, Neil chose skiing, so Laurie procured annual passes for himself and Neil to Martok, where for several years they could be found skiing on weeknights after school and work. For his summer activity, Neil chose sailing. Laurie's father, Chuck, raced out of Chester, Nova Scotia on his boat, the Summer Girl, and was by all accounts an animated and competitive sailor. So much so that there weren't that many people willing to sail with him. After Neil's first race with Chuck, he came home concerned about all of the yelling and the screaming. So Laurie told him to just say, "Fuck off, Grandpa," the next time. So that's what Neil did, and after that, they got on fine. In the summer of 1993, Neil joined the crew of the brigantine the Fair Jean for its voyage in the Lake Ontario region. Noting that children and grandchildren are generally terrible at correspondence, a Mrs. Jean Spear of Ottawa, a passenger on the Fair Jean, wrote to Wanda about her 10-day voyage on the vessel. Among other adventures, Mrs. Spear recounts that once in Oswego, New York, the Fair Jean was the lead vessel in a reenactment of the 1834 battle at Fort Ontario, in which the British lost to the Americans. As Mrs. Spear recounts, "We didn't win then, and we weren't allowed to win in 1993. Captain Fuller, however, refused to run up the white flag. And we see Captain Fuller here, a decorated naval veteran, with his wife Jean, and they're in their viewing chairs and appropriate hats for the occasion. Now, Mrs. Spear's letter becomes a bit confusing at this point, but it sounds like something of a massive water balloon fight erupted. The large crowd that had assembled to view the battle loved every minute, despite not being sure exactly what was happening. Mrs. Spear noted that overall Neil seemed fit, well, and happy. She said that he had no fear of heights, so when action was required high in the rigging, Neil was always the first there. This is, of course, a trait that would serve him well later in life for climbing and work. Mrs. Spear also suggests that Wanda asked Neil to tell her the story about him being in the hold in chains. However, she provides no further detail on this intriguing teaser. Following his graduation from high school, Neil attended Dalhousie University and ultimately graduated from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design after studying design and environmental planning. Now, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the abundance of Neil's hair in his student IT picture in the middle there. Practically unrecognizable for those of us who knew him in later years. In October 1995, the Emmses visited Disney World. Somewhere along the way, Neil started to take Daffy Duck along on hikes, starting off the tradition of toy photography that he and Finn are both still quite into. While at NASCAD, he worked as a research assistant to instructor Jill Grant, preparing original illustrations demonstrating issues discussed in a chapter she wrote in a book on Canadian cities in transition. The middle part at the bottom here is from the proofs of that book. A fateful party in 1996 set Neil on the path to beautiful British Columbia as he met Shelley there, and she was apparently not completely put off by his shirt. Neil and Shelley were married in April 2021, with Matthew as best man and Colin and Jason among the wedding party. Wanda and Laurie took the opportunity to tour the region, including Whistler. Now, about 3 years after the wedding came what I can safely say was the happiest day of Neil's life, September 1st, 2004. As recounted in Neil's comic, catastrophe was averted and Finley was ultimately not born in the back of the car. And he apparently had those luscious eyelashes right from the start. Being Finn's dad was the most important thing to Neil and the number one thing he was proud of. Neil immediately began the process of indoctrinating Finley to his favorite things, including skiing and sketching, climbing, bouldering, or what appears to be some sort of bouldering wrestling hybrid, and trains, because who doesn't like trains? Trains are awesome. And of course, we can't forget Godzilla. Finn was always drawn to dinosaurs, so it was no surprise that when Neil introduced him to the classic Goji films, Godzilla quickly became a big deal. And naturally, Finn had to be Godzilla for Halloween. Neil worked his butt off to design and build probably one of the coolest Halloween costumes Finn ever have. And I think we can all agree it's pretty damn impressive. Now, if Neil were here, I'm pretty sure he'd want to see more adorable pictures of baby Finley. So let's just do that for a few slides. Please feel free to ooh and ah. In 2010, Neil was right into the Olympics, and he, Shelley, and Finn were lucky enough to score tickets to 3 events, 2 of which were hockey. When Canada won men's hockey gold, a giant street hockey game appeared right in the middle of Broadway. Shortly after, they also scored some tickets to the playoffs as the Canucks made their Stanley Cup run, including the final game. Finn has a real love for the game now because of all this intensive hockey exposure. Neil and Shelley ended their marriage in 2013, meaning that the 3 of them wouldn't be going to any more hockey games together after that. But Neil was super pleased that he and Finn were able to catch a few games together, including this season. In case you hadn't realized, Neil passed just before the Canucks got knocked out of this year's Stanley Cup, which is probably a good thing because they would have been pissed. Now, I'm not really sure what's happening in this picture, but as far as I know, no bones are broken. Neil undertook a career change in 2012, starting at BCIT to become a journeyman electrician. This is also around the time that we met, so I'm going to take at least partial credit for the difference between the faces on the first and the second stereotypes here. After a few short stints with other companies, Neil started at All West, where he frequently got to demonstrate his ability to remain unaffected by heights. He loved working for the company, including his work on safety, but mostly his colleagues. He also looked forward every year to the annual Christmas party and summer picnics. All West Christmas parties were always a highlight of the holiday season for Neil, who was never one to turn down a good roast beef buffet. He was also a big fan of the annual summer barbecue, looking forward to the games, the reptiles, and of course the cannoli. Okay, that last one, that might be more me. Neil was super touched when Anthony hosted a hockey box in Neil's honor, and that so many of you here today came to support him as well. He also had a great time on the All West fishing trip a few years back. Of course, as it turns out, there was someone else in our house who was also a big fan of the results of the fishing trip, but we'll get to her in a minute. In 2016, Neil and I decided we needed more room, and Finn helped us out with our offers and on the final inspection for our eventual home. The new place provided an ideal venue for games, which I think the photographic evidence shows clearly that I won. Although I'm not entirely sure what the rules of this game were, so maybe not. As previously mentioned, Neil always loved pets. So after we'd lived together for a few years, he started working on convincing me that we should get a dog. This was a big change for me, as I'd never had any pets aside from fish, and in fact, I didn't have a very good track record of keeping those alive. So Neil started looking at Pet Finder, also known as Tinder for dogs, and came across a very sweet poodle. While we didn't end up adopting that dog, we met a woman who regularly brought rescues over from Taiwan, and a few months later, she reached out to us about Momo. Neil always loved a good before and after rescue dog transformation story. On January 11th, 2018, henceforth known as the Momoversary, we got our own transformation story. Neil loved Momo from the second they met, and she crawled into his lap and fell asleep. She now looks completely different, partially because of regular haircuts that cost more than mine, but largely because of lots of love and cuddles. Neil took his dog daddy's duties seriously, practicing good dog skills with Momo in training classes and at the park. providing ample squishies and cuddles. And of course, providing alternate transportation when Momo got tuckered out on long walks. When you have little legs, you get tired a lot. Most of you will not be surprised when I admit that once Momo joined us, our lives became pretty much dog-focused, with our main weekend activity becoming adventure walks at a local beach or park. Neil knew how much I loved Momo, so he wanted to make sure I could take her with me when I went to work. He found a Playmobil set with a dog that looked sort of like her, but was the wrong color, so he broke out the white model paint. Minnie, Momo, and the rest of the Playmobil dog pack now hang out with some Star Trek minis in our living room. Neil changed my life by making me into a dog person. I also changed Neil, though, including by introducing him to karaoke. It had never occurred to Neil to attempt karaoke before, but once he did, he was hooked, and Tevya, Janos, and I became regulars for a time at the local Legion. Even after he lost his voice from ALS, Neil wasn't willing to give it up, programming the text-to-talk app on his phone with the lyrics to the Talking Heads' Psycho Killer. In June 2019, Alpine, who we have here on the casket, joined Instagram, gaining more followers than Neil in under a week. Alpine quickly began to join Neil in climbing and other adventures. In February 2022 came the news that nobody wanted to hear. But Neil didn't want condolences or sympathy. He wanted to seize the time he had left, and so he said, fuck it, bring on the bucket list. First stop, New York, May 2022. Tourism had not fully picked up after the pandemic, which meant we breezed through lineups for everything from the Statue of Liberty ferry to the Empire State Building. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, strolled through Central Park, and met the Hulk at the Lego store. After the trip, Neil had a few observations about New York. Firstly, high-speed car chases through the city that you see in movies could never happen in real life. And secondly, after spotting a sign for the special parking rate of $9.29 for 30 minutes, Neil wasn't as likely to complain about Vancouver parking as much. As previously noted, Neil had always liked trains, so what better train journey for a Canadian train enthusiast than the Rocky Mountaineer? In July 2022, we made the journey from Vancouver to Banff. And yes, the waters of Lake Moraine are actually that color. I had always thought that a river cruise in Germany sounded quite delightful, so off we went in September 2022. Accompanied by Alpine, we started our trip in Frankfurt am Main, where we boarded at the cruise along the Rhine to Amsterdam. The cruise did not disappoint. The 40-mile stretch of the river between Bingen and Koblenz in Germany is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the banks are lined with more than 40 castles and fortresses, a fact that you can verify on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. After Amsterdam, we took the train to Berlin, where we visited the DDR Museum and Neil got to pretend to drive a Trabant. We also visited the section of the Berlin Wall known as the East Side Gallery. After that, Neil recounted that when he was 7, Disney's movie The Night Crossing made a lasting impression on him. This movie was a true story about two families who escaped from East to West Germany by making their own hot air balloon. So he was pretty stoked to see the wall himself over 40 years later. A very nice gentleman we met at Classic Remise Berlin told us about Karl Marx Allee, a boulevard built by the GRD in the socialist classicism of the Soviet Union between 1952 and 1960. He was not wrong that this was a must-see. Next, it was on to Munich for the original Oktoberfest. Now, an important thing to know about Oktoberfest is it's actually to welcome October, so it's at the end of September. So plan your trips accordingly. From the time we arrived in Munich, Neil started hinting that he was interested in traditional German costume, but I didn't realize how much until he went for an awfully long smoke break and came back with lederhosen, despite not speaking German, or at this point, really being able to speak at all. I felt quite underdressed after this. Top of Neil's travel bucket list was Japan, but it was still closed to tourism when he was diagnosed. As soon as we heard the October 2022 announcement that Japan was opening back up, we booked our trip for the next month. What can I say about Japan? Japan is lovely, and as you can see from the photos, we arrived in the prime fall colors viewing period. we focused on Tokyo and Kyoto and followed the general approach of one cultural site or garden and one pop culture activity per day. Highlights include the NTV giant clock designed by Miyazaki, the Edo Architectural Museum, the Kyoto Train Museum, Nijo Castle, Kenjuku-ji, the Golden Temple, and Okochi Sanso Garden, the former home and garden of the Japanese actor Denjiro Okochi. Next, a quick jaunt down to Portland, Oregon in April 2023, including a ride on the Mount Hood Railroad, more railways, a 3-mile, 3% grade that takes you on one of only 5 switchbacks remaining in the United States. Some train trivia for you train enthusiasts there. We also made a stop at the rather spectacular and sketchable Multnomah Falls. Next stop, Las Vegas in May 2023, where we checked out the Strip, fancy hotel lobbies, and the Pinball Hall of Fame, which I highly recommend as the old mechanical machines are very satisfying. The highlight of our trip was our helicopter tour of the Grand Canyon, a bucket list trip gifted to us by Lori. As you can tell from both Neil and Alpine's photos, it's pretty spectacular. Now, I understand that Ryan remains miffed that he missed out on this trip on their earlier trip to Vegas, as high winds resulted in the last-minute cancellation of his and Neil's scheduled helicopter tour. But it certainly worked out nicely for me. Also, for your interest, I wanted to point out that the beavers that accompany Alpine on his adventures are named Bob and Doug. Strange Brew was up there on the list of Neil's favorite movies. In September 2023, we traveled out east to visit friends and family in Ontario. After a quick visit with Michael in Kingston, it was on to St. Catharines to stay with Neil's brother Colin and his family. St. Catharines being just a jump and a skip from Niagara, we checked out the beauty that is the falls, juxtaposed with the crazy of the main street, as evidenced by this Frankenstein Burger King thing that's happening over there. Then it was off to Toronto, where Neil tried on shoes at the Bata Shoe Museum. We spent a good few hours feeling like giants at Little Canada, which Neil and I both highly recommend, and is actually the place where we got the miniature that's on the table there that several people have already asked me about. And of course, one of my favorite places in Toronto is the Birksea Park Dog Fountain, which, in case you were wondering, is not a fountain for dogs, but rather a fountain made up of dog statues. Our trip to London in November 2023 was our last trip. Although Neil was using a cane at this point, he still managed to climb all over the Tower of London. We checked out the Leaky Street Arches Graffiti Gallery, had tea at Fortnum and Mason, and visited the Natural History Museum. When we went to check out Parliament and Big Ben, we found the roads barricaded and full of bobbies. As it turns out, it was the opening of Parliament, so the King was there to deliver his speech. We waited for his procession to pass by and saw his gilded carriage, as well as a second carriage for the crown jewels, a lot of horses, and a few bands. The King does not travel light. By mid-November, the Christmas lights were in full swing. We took a tour on the Mail Rail train, a decommissioned electric train system under London built explicitly for mail delivery, and visited the London Transport Museum. And, of course, we couldn't miss a quick visit to Paddington Station to visit Paddington Bear. In the new year, Neil's physical condition started to deteriorate, and we started taking things a lot easier. Even at the end, I was struck by Neil's resilience and sense of humor, cracking jokes about his body's failures in situations that others might find devastating, that frankly I found devastating. He always reminded me not to get too bogged down in the awfulness of it all. As his ability to walk deteriorated, he was feeling cooped up at home and wrote on social media about how excited he was when his wheelchair arrived and he could rejoin me and Momo on our evening walks. He was overjoyed at finding a row of late blooming cherry blossoms. As we navigate how to live our lives without him, his approach to living with ALS offers us a model of how to crack jokes in the face of adversity and find joy in small pleasures. Goodbye, my love. We will miss you.
Of course, a lot of nice things are said about Neil. You can go on Facebook, I was there last night looking at what tributes and things that people wrote about Neil. It's really good. And there's a couple more speakers. We're still going to hear some great things about Neil, but I just wanted to dull that rosy glow a little bit and tell you that Neil could also be a little bit of a dick. From making fun of skiers that couldn't keep up, to making me jump off a building, the guy, he could find an angle to really rub it in. So, take the skiing, for example. And I think it's the next slide, Harley, let's put that one. So the skiing. So, I know that, of course, Neil was a good skier, he loved skiing. And he was so proud that his son took up skiing as well, and he talked about that a lot. Now, Neil was a good skier, and ALS didn't slow him down. In fact, having ALS gave him the perfect angle to be a dick. I remember helping Neil get his ski boots on in Whistler, and for me it was just a reminder again of the ALS, of like the fine motor skills being affected, right? Now, his doctors were not particularly fond of Neil skiing by himself. Andrea was a little bit concerned too, so I was charged with looking after Neil. Now, Neil knew all of this, so what do you think happened once we got to the top of the mountain? Neil raced down that mother like he had 9 lives and there was an avalanche chasing him. Do you know how humiliating it is to have 30 years of skiing experience and not be able to keep up with someone with 1 year of ALS under their belt? He would disappear ahead of me, and I'm just thinking, Andrea is going to kill me if I lose him. And then, not only that, he did the same thing. He invited a bunch of co-workers from All West to come skiing with him, right? And when they didn't keep up, he didn't mind actually spending the time to type out his insult to his workmates. And I'm just going to do that for you here now and see if this works.
You've just been beaten by a 48-year-old with ALS.
What a dick. Now, when Neil was first diagnosed with ALS in 2022, he called me up and he said that he wanted to go to Vegas. So I was there first, Andrea, anyway. When I agreed, though, I didn't know what he had secretly had in store for me. In cahoots with his father, Laurie, thank you, I guess, Neil had arranged for us to jump off the tallest building in Vegas. And that is an 830-foot free fall at 40 miles an hour. So let's see that. Let's see what that looks like there. Okay. So now, while you're getting suited up for this thing, this so-called thrill, by the 20-somethings that work there and hook you up, they ask you, who is more afraid of doing this? Because they know from experience, whoever's more afraid, if they don't go first, they're going to chicken out when they're by themselves and they just won't do it, right? So obviously I'm the more afraid person, so I had to go first. And just to rub it in, before you jump off, they say, make sure you land on your feet. Is there like another option? I don't know, but anyway, so there I am. They ask you to bring your toes to the edge of this incredible drop, right? And then they ask you, you're connected by like a skinny wire, and then they ask you to jump. Now, the place is called Sky Jump, and for me it was more like sky, you know, tip off kind of thing. And down I went. So Neil watched me the whole time, obviously, and at the bottom, it's my turn to watch Neil go. So the stage is set for Neil to be a dick. Let's play the video.
That's dog.
Now, I guess you're laughing because you saw like him smiling when he landed. This was just a new thing I've just even noticed. But you probably didn't catch it because it's like way at the top. But when Neil jumped off, he did like a spread eagle head first dive off the platform. Now, some may say that Neil was just having fun, and I agree. But I think that he was rubbing it in my face, that I was super scared, and he was showing me up. What a dick. But that is what I loved about Neil and why for the last 2 years Neil was such a big inspiration to me. Neil took this terrible prognosis and he made a choice, and his choice was to live full tilt. He went skiing, he went climbing, he traveled, he socialized, he cracked endless jokes. He invited friends over for bad B-movie nights and hilarious twisted board games like that in the top corner called Joking Hazard. Seriously, if you don't take anything else from this today, try this game, Joking Hazard, okay, and you'll understand Neil's sense of humor. And doing karaoke with no voice? I mean, come on. Neil loved hockey too, and he even invited us all over to his place to watch one of the playoff games a week before he passed. He could have taken it differently, but instead he used it to maximize every opportunity. And sure, he knew he was going to die. But the weird thing is, we all know that too. Now, they say, live every day like it's your last, which is super hard to do every day. But what about like, live like the end is near? So what would you do? And then just go and do it. That is just a small part of what I have learned from my incredible journey with Neil. Being a dick once in a while was Neil's way of having fun. And man, I had so much fun with him. Okay, now we are going to hear from someone who refused to jump off that tower, his brother Colin.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, my name is Colin. I'm Neil's older brother. Of course, most of you, all of you, know him from his time here in Vancouver, which was very much the second half of his life. But the first half of his life was spent actually some time in Western Canada, but a lot of time out east. And so let me tell you a bit about that. The first thing I will do will correct a story that Andrea told about when he went to the hospital. I did not wish him to come back. I asked my grandmother who was looking after me, I'm like, are they taking him back? I understood returns. And I was disappointed when they were back and he was with them. Of course he doesn't tell it like that. But I did grow to love my brother. And in those days, things like measles, chickenpox, and mumps were common, and our parents definitely went by the philosophy that if one of us caught something, both of us were getting it. So they would often quarantine us together for one to infect the other as soon as one got sick, which meant a lot of time with us playing Lego and Star Wars and things like that. He was always, despite all the Chewbacca toys, he was always Luke Skywalker and I was always Han Solo. So go figure. When we were little, we spent a lot of time camping as well, and some of my fondest memories with Neil were in the back of the family station wagon. Our parents would pile all of the camping gear and everything into the back seat, and Neil and I would go back into the trunk space because who needed seatbelts? We would read comic books and play Hot Wheels back there, and camping was a huge part of our spring, summer, and falls when we lived in Calgary for 7 years. And it was on those trips that Neil started to really grasp his sense of misadventure, setting a record for hospital visits. Multiple bike crashes where he split his lip, his chin. One time he fell into the corrugated metal of a fire pit and peeled his back. And his masterpiece, which was refusing to remove a heavy sweater one time on the hottest day of the year, and his arms blistered from wrist to shoulder, which wasn't discovered till we got home. which necessitated a trip to the ER where they proceeded to wrap his arms completely in gauze. And my parents, for some reason, and maybe this is where the dick stuff started happening, bought him French fries and brought him home. Now try to imagine him with his arms fully stiff trying to eat French fries. It was a good laugh. I'll never forget it. We moved around the country a lot, from Halifax to Windsor, Nova Scotia to Calgary and back to Halifax, and shout out to people watching from Cole Harbour. I know there's a few people that are tuning in. And our interests really diverged. Neil definitely started cutting his own path. As you saw, he became an avid skier. He was a skateboarder. He took to sailing with our grandfather, after I definitely didn't. He joined the school band. He became a trumpet player, and a really good trumpet player, much to everyone's annoyance in the house because he practiced all the time. And I think when he started to play the trumpet, he also started to develop his ear for music, good music. While I was listening to genius music like Kiss and Motley Crue, he was listening to Nirvana and the Black Crowes and Matthew Sweet and Sloan, and into the classics like Zeppelin and the Ramones. And he was definitely cool before anyone realized it. His comic sensibilities definitely went to the absurd. Spaceballs, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Airplane, things like that. These were his favorite movies. He watched them so much that to this day, when I see someone get hurt in a hockey game, or if I see someone fall down, right away I'm thinking like, dude, it's just a flesh wound, get up, come on. Despite his misadventures camping, he was an adventurer. Andrea showed the pictures from when he was, he crewed on the sailboat. 1 year in high school, he did a school exchange to Sweden. I don't remember much about that other than that we had a Swedish girl that came to our house for a little while, which was great. When he graduated high school, he went to Dal, and he went into geology, which made no sense. But it was university. But he quickly realized he wasn't in the right place. And one day he told me that he was thinking about dropping out. And I just told him he was on his own telling our parents, because I wanted no part of that conversation. But he had to be really brave to do it, but he did it. And of course he did it. And he ultimately ended up at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, studying environmental planning. And there he really quickly found himself. He moved out, he was living with his friends, and he really started to embrace life and really became who he was. And it was at NASCA that he met Shelley. And eventually they moved here, be closer to her family, and they married and they had Finley. Of course, his move to Vancouver is where you all come to know Neil. And I'm going to sure learn lots tonight at the pub from everybody hearing the stories, because in Emms family tradition, he rarely called anybody from his family, and I obliged him by not calling him. And so, we returned the favor, and we really didn't keep in touch as much as we should. So I'm really looking forward to talking to everybody tonight and learning more of his time here. One of the things I admired most about him when he got his diagnosis was, 23 years ago, we lost our mom to ALS, and our father told us, after that experience, we should never wait for anything in life. Like, go out and live it, do things, go places, don't have regrets. So when Neil got his diagnosis, you saw what he posted. He didn't cry about it. He lived life hard. He traveled. You saw all his pictures. He climbed probably longer than he should have. He skied longer than he should have, but that's who he was. They traveled the world, and he took the occasional boys trip. Yes, I did not jump off the tower because that's stupid. We had a good weekend, and there is definitely unspoken activities there, and there might be some photographic proof somewhere on a Facebook page or something, Ryan. Side note to that one, afterwards he told me he had a great time in Vegas. I have family in Vegas from my wife's side, so I'm very familiar with town and knew what to do, knew where to go. And we did some of the things you saw and some of the things that shall be unspoken. But he said he had a great time and he really wanted to bring Andrea, and my only advice to him was he should plan a whole different set of activities. What I'm most proud of him for is that he decided when he was ready. And so when he got sick and he wasn't, he couldn't enjoy his life anymore, he decided that was it. He was brave enough to make that call, and I applaud him for from our family, we want to thank Andrea. You were such a rock for him. Not just during his illness, but even beforehand as well. And it gives our family a lot of comfort that he found such a wonderful partner to share his last years with. And on behalf of our family, I want to thank everybody in this community here in Vancouver, Shelley, Finn, all his friends, family, his co-workers. You propped him up when he was low. You celebrated the highs of his achievements with him. And so as we're here celebrating his life, as we say goodbye to him, I just need to remember him for how he lived. He wasn't afraid to change the path when it wasn't working for him. He laughed at everything and everyone, including himself. And above all, he was a brave adventurer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Now we're going to hear from Neil's friend, Matthew, and occasional Superman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think before I go further, as the saying goes, you can judge a person by the number of people that care about them in a room. And just looking out right now and seeing all of us here today to remember Neil, that speaks very fondly, loudly how much he was loved. And following all those great speeches, you may just have to give me a couple of seconds, but I will try to get through this. I met Neil back in, I want to say, 1999, through some friends, Claire, Jason, Shelley, and when I met Neil, nice guy. We didn't really hit it off per se right away, but then a few more outings, got to know each other a little better, and then something really special happened. Something very special happened. He introduced me to his, you're right, comic book collection, and the rest was history. The rest was history. And that, we joke, but that was part of our big bond, per se. And anything pop culture, Star Wars, I think Neil and I might have been separated at birth. It was a little scary how much we had in common. And so then, we became closer, of course, and one night, I remember, I want to say fall of 2000, a bunch of us went to, I think, a dance club, comedy club, I think, and Neil and I just went to go check on parking, and Shelley and Neil, you were engaged at this point, and we were going to check on parking, and he goes, oh, I got a question to ask. Oh, do you want me to pay for the parking? I'm thinking, yeah, sure, no problem, sure, whatever, what do you need? No, could you be my best man? The world stopped for me in the best way at that moment. Growing up myself, maybe we could all relate. Some friendships don't quite work out the way they want, and you sort of think, will I ever be able to stand by somebody for such a special day? And the fact that Neil cared enough about me to even ask me that, I was sincerely, still at this day, very honored to this day. I think, I think that's us, the top right there. That was April 01, a very special day, as all of us knew and then can attest to. And so we our friendship grew and grew, and to the point where I asked him to be my best man when I married Wendy, who's not here today. She couldn't be here, but she sends her love, Anya. And Neil was my best man. I got married in October of 05, so he returned the favor. Now, probably wondering about this. Basically, this was my bachelor party, and Neil being Neil, you didn't really know what to expect, kind of thing, expect the unexpected. And I had bought a Superman costume, just for comfort, laid around the house. And who doesn't have one? And so he knocks on my door. Door opens. Hey, you ready to go? Yep, the cab's downstairs. Get the suit. What do you mean the suit? What do you mean? The suit. Oh, crud. And I knew what was happening. And I walked around downtown Vancouver wearing a Superman outfit. And the thing is, and this is what we could all relate about Neil, is being a fun guy that he was. A fun guy, as everyone has said, his sense of humor, he had you in stitches with much of his humor. Walking around downtown in a Superman suit is something previously I don't think he would have ever done for all the gold of Fort Knox. But something that night about Neil told me that, you know what, Matthew? I'm going to have a great time. I'm in good hands. He's not trying to humiliate me, nothing like that at all. We're going to go have fun. And absolutely, Jason was there, Rhino was there, and it was one of the most fun nights of my life. It really was. And he made me do some stuff that I won't tell in public, but we did a great time. And again, I think that really speaks to Neil's character. That you're gonna have fun, but not cross the line kind of thing. And if he knew that I did not want to do anything, and all of us do, he would not twist our arm, which was one of the many great things about him. Is there another slide there of I think, climbing on there? Oh, there we go, yes. Our Comic-Con adventures. You recognize Ryan, and the other gentleman is Cobra Commander. He just want to hang out with us. And so that again, Neil, with many of us, he opened my eyes to a lot of fun new stuff. This was late, I think this is spring of '07. We went down to Seattle Comic Convention, and I got to meet Margot Kidder and Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca, and just a lot of great laughs. And it became a tradition. And a couple of years later, Ryan, I don't think you were there, it was just Neil and I. We're going to Seattle. We get to the border crossing. The guard there, just big stock guy, and give our passports. Where you guys headed? Seattle for the day? Yeah. What are you going down there for? Both of us. Comic convention. Looks at us. 10-second pause. You guys nerds? Yes, sir. We drove away. Have a good day. And I said to Neil, do you think he believed us when we said that? And Neil said, of course. I said, well, why would you say of course? And Neil said, because Matthew, who in their right mind is their 40-year-old going to make up a story about going to comic convention? Touche. So that was one of the many fun things that Neil and I did together, either him alone or with Ryan and everyone. Just again, a lot of good times. I know it's been touched on today that he was into rock climbing and hikes, and he learned pretty quick that wasn't my forte. He got me up Mount Chima in Chilliwack a couple of times, and he's probably carrying most of my stuff, don't be surprised. But even the rock climbing, I think I went one time with Shelley, Neil and I think the three of us agreed I'm much better as a rock climber watcher than a climber, so I think that worked out for the best. But, hey Neil, where are we not climbing today? So, but he was okay with that. He knew, okay, that's not his thing, that's okay. And I think, that is not sober, protect, summer 02. I think that's Ryan taking the picture. Again, you're seeing a pattern here with Neil, just a lot of laughs, trying different things, and I think, that's another great picture. That was his last Christmas, all of us together, and and everyone's touched on that, but for sure, when he was diagnosed with ALS, he had told me that he was having trouble talking, and he was going to a specialist, and yes, because of sadly what happened with his mom, many of us sadly thought the worst, of course. And then when he told me, of course, as we all were devastated. But it's the way he told me. He sent me a Facebook link. Well, shit happens. Yeah, it does. And me with some of that news, I don't think I would have been that calm, if you will, I think. But I think, as Andrea said, Ryan and many of us here that knew him, that was his style. He was not going to throw in the towel. He seize the day as they did, and yeah, he could have, just taken on a loan, or he could have enjoyed life and be with the ones he loved. And he definitely chose the latter for sure. And great stories, if you will, came out of this tragedy. I mean, one of them, of course, the folks he worked with. He loved working with you guys, and that whole hockey game box you did for him there. I think it was Canucks and the Coyotes. That is unbelievable. You don't hear those stories all the time. So when you guys did, I want to personally thank you for doing that for him, because I know that made his year, absolutely. Finn loved being a dad. He's watching that right now. Loved being a dad. The whole Godzilla thing, which I think you're still doing, as a torch for sure. It's great. And yeah, I'll just wrap this up here. But I think everyone, our lives are not the same without him, because they were much better with him. Andrea, you were his rock, you were each other's rock, and again, I think you were a key reason why he always had those smiles and stuff. So I just want to say, Neil, thank you for being my second brother. I love you. I miss you. We all miss you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So now we're going to learn a little bit more about that really adventurous Neil. This is our last speaker before we have a little bit of a chance to open the floor if anyone wants to speak. But we're going to hear from Josh, who is Neil's friend and climbing friend. And I think he's going to touch on the whole climbing the chief thing too. So I'm really excited to hear about this.
Yeah, so I first met Neil in 2016, not long after moving to Vancouver, and came here, found a climbing gym, as one does, and he was there, and we met through a mutual friend, and he was actually kind enough to be my partner for the belay test you have to do when you first arrive in a new gym. And you've already heard about Neil's wicked sense of humor. Well, so the person running the test was a friend of his, and the two of them thought it would be amusing. Part of this test, you have to take a fall. Well, let's see just how much spare rope we can give him. This will be interesting. So gave a few extra armfuls. I didn't really know him at this point, and so I go down and he goes up, and it's an exciting introduction to each other. It became the start of a great friendship and a lot of future adventures, and really sort of set the tone for the kind of guy he was. Someone who, wicked sense of humor, I think, summarizes it better than I could. So Neil would climb in the gym and also outside in Squamish and sometimes further afield. This is him. Well, actually, if you go back one, this is him on Yak Peak in the Coquihalla. If you drive over Highway 5 and look north, you'll see this beautiful dome of granite, and that's Neil up on it, looking fearless as usual. And if you go to the next slide. But mostly though, he would climb in Squamish, which I think was his favorite place for that. And if you're ever looking through fuzzy photos or squinting in them trying to figure out if that's Neil or not, because everyone's wearing bright colors, it all looks the same, you should look for a fuzzy purple chalk bag. That's the dead giveaway that this is indeed Neil. If you're surveying around, you just look for the chalk bag and you can find him for sure. So one of the things I love about Neil is his tendency to obsess over somewhat quirky things. So at some point he was telling me about his love of G.I. Joes, and in particular this character Alpine, who is a G.I. Joe that has a rope and other climbing gear. And I think he'd had Alpine as a kid, if I'm not mistaken, along with other G.I. Joes, but no longer had them or no longer had access to them. So he was able to find a new copy of Alpine on eBay or something like that, and that became his climbing companion for all of his trips. And he would set Alpine in various places and take the appropriate photos. And as was already mentioned, Alpine had his own Instagram account, Alpine Adventures, which quickly overtook Neil's Instagram account in terms of followers. Neil might have been a bit salty about that. But anyways, that was a fixture of our climbing trips and his climbing trips. And yeah, so as we've already heard, when Neil got his diagnosis, he decided to throw things into high gear. And one of the things he wanted to do was to climb the Squamish Chief. So this photo was taken 2 years ago, more or less to the day, give or take. And Neil had already started losing some of his strength and realized that if he was going to do this, this would be a good time now. And it's a big day. Maybe some of you have hiked up the Chief. Climbing it is quite a different matter. It takes a well-conditioned person in there, with all their facilities, a lot of energy to do it. But that didn't seem to slow Neil down very much. And he was very, very happy to have triumphed to the top of it. As you can see here, he was, normally you try to go light on these things, but then we get to the top and learn that he's actually carrying some beers up. So anyways, that's all very much in keeping. And the last time I climbed outside with Neil was last spring, and by that point he'd already lost his ability to speak. He had to use his phone to type, and when you're climbing, of course, your hands are not available for the phone. And his left hand had begun to lose some of its strength, and definitely his neurologist was telling him you need to be toning it back a little bit. But yeah, he wasn't really to be deterred. He decided, well, today is the day I'm going to lead a climb, so that's a much more challenging endeavor. And he sort of looked at us and typed on his phone, "Don't tell my neurologist about this part," and then launched up, and it didn't give him much trouble. So yeah, this route here is called, so it's in Squamish, and it's called Skywalker, which I think is fitting. And partway up the route is a belay station with a little plaque, and it says, "May the Force be with you," on it. And then you sort of launch off into the void on the right after that plaque. And I think Neil quite liked that climb, that little spot of it, and the climb went well, so I guess the Force was with us that day, I suppose. And I really think this last picture is how I'll remember Neil. He's outside, he has a big smile on his face, and he's excited to go and do something new.
I just wanted to add something to the story about the Chief, if we could go back to that slide. I think, as everyone knows, Neil was very open about his ALS journey on social media, including Twitter or whatever it's called now. And so this was very much a bucket list thing that he wanted to do, and he knew that doing it with Josh, who was so experienced, would be safe, and I felt really confident in that as well. So Neil posted that picture on the right on Twitter, and he got close to 70,000 likes on that. It went a little bit viral. A lot of those people also, when I posted that Neil had passed away, got, again, several thousand likes. So there's a number of people really expressing how following his approach to the journey, how it had really impacted them, and how meaningful it had been. So yeah, that's Neil's viral Twitter moment right there on the right.
Yeah, he did embrace that. There he is with the ALS shirt. So he didn't shy away from the fact of what he was faced with, and that was one of the kind of cool things about it. And he did get challenges on that post, from people saying, like, you got ALS, you shouldn't be up there, or whatever. And I think the fact that most people agreed with what he was doing, which was living the best life that he could with what he had time he had left, was the right way to go. So I think we all agree with that. We are going to have a moment here. If there's anybody that wanted to say something that is a fun anecdote with Neil in the same vein as what we've been speaking to, now's your opportunity. Is there anybody that would like to speak? Okay, Neil sound famous.
Jeez Louise, everyone's so much taller than me. It's amazing seeing how many people Dad's affected positively in his life. It really warms me up seeing that. Now, when Dad got ALS, Andrea told me that I need to keep an eye on him. I did my absolute best to, but that did not stop him. No slows him skiing, but the last day we went skiing together, Dad decided that he not only wanted to do a double black, but when we got back from the double black, we were both hungry. So he had his tube feeder. At this point, he wasn't supposed to be eating solid foods. Now, I wasn't too hungry since we had already eaten before going down Ruby Bowl, so I decided, you know what? Screw it, I'll go get myself a cinnamon bun. Why not? Last day being with Dad, time to celebrate. We're having a lot of fun. So I realized I forgot to get water from my cinnamon bun. So I have it there on the table. I looked at him, like, jokingly, watch my cinnamon bun to make sure no one eats it. And I come back with water, and there's about a quarter of a cinnamon bun left, and Dad's cheeks are stuffed. He's not supposed to be eating at this point, and he starts to swallow it. I start to panic. He starts choking. After the fact, I look at him. I'm gonna have to tell Andrea about this. It was over my dead body. So because he's dead now, I can finally get that off my chest. So leave it to Dad to choke his way through a whole cinnamon. As far as I know, last thing he ate. He left me maybe this much of it. Oh, it was so bad. Another thing was the last hockey game I went to him with was we lost, and he was mad about that. So he gives me his cane, and he wobbles down the stairs with his hands up like this because he's mad. Makes his way down the whole entire stairs, and then he decides when we're on the SkyTrain that he wants to stand up. And I think my stepdad Pete's somewhere in the crowd. Can't really see everyone in the crowd. You may have heard about this, but Dad decides that while he wants to stand up, he gives me his cane, and he lets himself fall onto the people behind him. He is terrible. He did not like listening to the doctors at all, even though he did. He also told me about how he decided that he still wanted to drink. So what he did with this feeding tube was he would put a syringe into the drink, and he would push it all the way down. Yeah, do you guys have a photo of that? There we go. He worried the hell out of me. I was at work, and I got a text from Dad with no context, and he had blood running all the way down his face. I had to tell Mom to tell Andrea for him to stop sending me those photos because they worried me at work, and I was supposed to be focusing on the kids who already worried me enough. So what he decided was he would just send me the photos the moment I was done work. So those last couple of weeks of work, I kept worrying that I would get a new photo of Dad in the ER. I miss him a lot. I'm gonna miss those photos. I didn't like them at the time, but I'm gonna miss them so much. Yeah. It's lovely seeing you all. Oh, wait. I do have one more. So, this is the day I say bye to Dad. This is the day he dies. So I'm in there, I'm crying with him, and he sort of signals to me for his phone. He says, dry mouth. So I go over to go do the little swab for him, go back. He spends about 5 minutes typing, not good enough. Not good enough. We go through this about 3 times, I'm crying. I'm so upset. And then last time he says, ha ha, you had to do that 3 times. Like 5 minutes before I say bye to him forever. He played just prankster until the end. He would go, look at the nurse and say, give me the good shit. No, the swab's not good enough. Finley, I'm going to hold you and not let go. There's a great song he showed me a couple days before he died, which he said, Handry was your favorite, which was from Saturday Night Live, which the short form of it is, it's not gay if it's a 3-way. And I'll end it there. You can search up that song yourself. It's a total riot. Funniest thing I've ever heard. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, was there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, well, yeah, prankster to the end, absolutely, 100%. Of course, yeah, well, thanks everybody for sharing your stories. So what we have now is we have a chance to send Neil off with our own message for him. For those that want to, you can sign the urn, the wooden urn up here, using a Sharpie. And if you know Comic Sans font, that's what we preferred because he loved comics. That's what Neil would want. We'll ask you just to line up and then we can sign that. For those that do not want to sign it or after you sign, please feel free to stick around in the back. We have some food and drinks. Please share a story or two, your favorites. Immediately after this event, as I mentioned, you're invited to join us at Heroes Welcome Pub, which is on Main and 23rd. So Heroes Welcome is important for Neil because Neil liked beer, as was mentioned by Finn. He really liked beer, and we can see that even when he couldn't swallow, he managed to get beer into his body. So if you have a working esophagus, you have no excuse to not come have a beer. Heroes Welcome is where Neil enjoyed many karaoke nights, as well as Tuesdays trivia with his friends Josh, Mike, Alex, Enzo, myself, Jason, Andrea. So come and have a beer with us after if you have the time. But for now, please, if you want to sign the urn, please line up and do that. Otherwise, enjoy food, stories. Remember, enter the draw for the Atari shirt. It's fun. It's free. While you're there, read about Project Hope to end ALS with research at UBC. Make a donation if you can. And I will draw for the t-shirt just before I kick you out at, 3:30, but maybe a little bit earlier.